everybody and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. Hi, I'm Gina and today I'm going to be teaching you how to make the perfect sheared dress for spring. I'm actually going to be making another version of the very dress that I'm wearing now. You may have seen the original tutorial for this dress 3 or 4 years ago now, and I was completely winging it. There were a lot of steps that were a bit messy. This time though, I've got a plan. I've got some ideas, I have learnt from previous mistakes, so I'm hoping we're going to get really, really beautiful fit and finish on this one, but the same gorgeous type of look. I love this dress. I reach for it all the time, even though it's a mess inside. I love wearing it, so I'm really, really excited to make another version. Now I'm going to warn you, if you do not like shearing, or you don't like doing a lot of shearing, or you can't be bothered to do a lot of shearing, this is not the tutorial for you. We are going to be shearing for hours. So I'm going to pop in a cutaway with everything that you need for this project. So the first thing you're going to need is a really nice fabric for shearing. I have gone for this really beautiful cotton seersucker. Now I love a seersucker, A, because it doesn't need ironing, and B, because they're a really, really nice weight fabric to shear. They don't go in too tight. It's very, very breathable as well. And I went for this particular design because I thought with this version of the sheared dress, I wouldn't shear as much. I was going to skip a couple of rows, and I can follow the checks on this fabric to make that happen instead of marking them out, which should hopefully save me a lot of time. I purchased around 3.5 meters of this fabric. I'm hoping that should be enough. I'm going for a midi to maxi length dress like this one here. I might have a tiered skirt if I've got enough fabric, but if not, I'll just have a regular kind of gathered midi length skirt. So 3.5 meters should be enough for that. This one is made in a cotton tencel mix, I believe. I can't really remember. It was a long time ago when I bought this fabric, and it sheared really, really well. The only thing about this fabric is it shows marks so easily, and it creases really easily. So it's not the most durable, but a cotton seersucker is going to be perfect for every day. The fabrics I wouldn't recommend for this project are lightweight viscoses because they shear in really, really tight, which means we're going to need a lot more fabric. And for this particular project, you're going to want something that's not quite that tight and springy. So I would say like lightweight cottons, cotton lawns, especially cotton poplins. You could do a viscose mix. So you could do a linen viscose. That would be really, really beautiful. You could use a really lightweight denim, sort of like a denim chambray or something like that. And this would also work really, really nicely with a lightweight linen. You don't want anything too stiff, but a nice washed lightweight linen would be beautiful for summer. Now, this might be an unpopular opinion, but as somebody who has been shearing for years and has worn sheared dresses like this one for years, I don't rate the expensive shearing elastics. I have bought this one just from Hobbycraft. It was just their regular shearing elastic, nothing special. I do like the hemline one as well. Don't get the cheapest of the cheap because they are really bad quality. But if you go for something like the Hobbycraft hemline ones, I'll link a load that I use and buy in the description box, so it gives you a better idea of what to look for. The other thing that we're going to use is, even though we're self-drafting this, you can use a pattern as a base if you would rather. So there's two options here. You could either use just a t-shirt, a fitted vest, anything that has got a high neck like this and an arm side that would be suitable for attaching sleeves to, and it goes down to your waist. That is all you need. So you can either just trace around a top, or you can use a pattern that you already own and we can work around that. I think we're ready to get underway. So the first thing we need to do is figure out how much we're going to need to shear. So grab yourself a tape measure and let's get ready. Before we start measuring and starting this dress, I just wanted to quickly talk about the things on this particular dress that didn't work and things that we're going to change this time to get a much nicer fit and finish. So firstly, I actually lined this bodice with a jersey so I wouldn't have to do a binding or anything around the neckline, and that is how this neckline is finished. But if you look closely, it's hard to see because my mic is right there, but you can see this neckline actually rolls over and lifts up, so it comes away from my body, so it isn't giving the nicest finish. So this time round we are going to use a binding around the neckline, and then to make it easier to get on and off, we're going to do a keyhole at the back and then a little tie at the neck. I think that will be really, really cute. Right, so before we get started, we need to figure out how much we need to shear. So we're going to cut a piece of this size, and that's what we're going to shear, and we are actually going to cut through the shearing to get this shape. Don't be scared, I promise you it's fine, it works. So to get your length, we are going to measure from our shoulder up here down to where we want this to end at our waist. So I want it to end on my natural waist here, which is 18 inches. Now I am going to add an inch each side for seam allowance. Okay, now for the width. So measure your bust. You want the widest part of you, and mine is 37. We're going to actually have two separate pieces. We're going to have a front and a back bodice. So we're going to add some seam allowance like we did before. So I'm just going to round this up to 38 this time, just because it's stretchy. So for me, I'm going to have two pieces that are 20 inches long and 38 inches wide, and that is what we're going to shear in. So you want double the width of your bust for your two pieces, and then you want your length that we measured earlier. So write that measurement down somewhere and keep hold of it in case you want to make this dress again. So we're all measured, but before we cut out, a couple of pointers. If you have a bust, I would recommend having your front piece wider than your back piece. So I've decided I'm actually going to cut out my front piece at 40 inches wide, and my back piece is going to be 36. So I've got an extra couple of inches on my front and then a couple of inches less across my back. I have quite a small back anyway, but I don't have a big bust, so I don't need to add too much extra. That should be enough just to make it stretch comfortably. If you have a particularly big bust, you're blessed in the chest, then I would add even up to an extra 5 inches at the front, so you've got plenty of room. It's easier to have more now than it is to have too little. So we can give it all a try on and see how it fits, and we can always take stuff away, but it's definitely better with this whole process to go bigger than smaller. And one last thing before we start cutting out, just cut out your front piece first before you touch any other fabric. I don't want you to waste fabric, and every machine and every fabric will shear differently. So at this point we're still kind of in the experimenting stage, and if it turns out that it shears really, really loosely, we don't have to cut as much for our second piece, or if it shears really, really tight, we might need a little bit more on our next piece. So the beauty of this fabric is we have lines to follow when we're cutting and when we're shearing. So what I've just done is cut along one of the green lines here, and then I'm going to measure from that line, which goes down to this green line here, and I will follow that line when I'm cutting. And it just means when we start shearing, everything will be straight, because on a check like this, or if you're using a stripe or a gingham, you want it to be straight or it will be really, really obvious.
I apologise for the audio on this section of the video, but as a new microphone user, I completely forgot to turn it on. So as you can see, it's going very, very well with the new mic so far. Let me fill you in on what I was telling you here. So basically, I'm just explaining how to set up for shearing on your sewing machine. So the first thing is your machine tension. Now my tension on my machine is normally on 4. That is my standard setting, which works for a regular straight stitch, and this is what I keep. I then adjust my stitch length to the longest setting on my machine, which is 5 on my machine. If the tension needs adjusting on the shearing, I tend to do that by rewinding my bobbin. Now for the bobbin, you are going to wind that by hand. So grab your bobbin, you're then going to need a spool of elastic, and we are going to wind that by hand. So you're going to want to grab an empty bobbin, and as you can see there are 2 little holes on either side of my bobbin. We are going to thread our elastic thread through one of these holes and pull it up through like so. Make sure you have a little bit of a tail of elastic left over, because we're going to need that when we set up our machine in a moment. So now you're going to grab the elastic that's within the bobbin and you're going to start winding that away from you. You're going to want a little bit of tension in the elastic, not too much that it's tight, just a tiny bit so you can feel that there's a bit of tension on it, and we just keep winding that over itself by hand. Try and keep the tension as even as possible all the way through winding the bobbin. Keep the rhythm going and make sure you're going all the way up and down your bobbin as well to keep it even. If it starts to look uneven in some places, you can just use your finger and move the elastic around to make it a little bit more streamlined. Once we finish doing that, we're going to cut our elastic away. Make sure again that you leave a long bit because it will spring back on itself when we cut it, and then we're ready to give it a try. So now we're going to put the bobbin into our machine. So what you're going to want to do is grab your bobbin plate, make sure your top thread has a long tail left over, and you're going to push that back out of the way and leave it loose. Place your bobbin in as you would normally, and then what we're going to do is, using your top thread, you're going to drop your needle down and then back up again to catch that tail of elastic, and then we're going to pull it through to the top plate. So through where your thread would normally come out, and pull it all the way through. You can use your plate from your bobbin to catch it if you need to, or a seam ripper or something like that, and then pull them both so they're not caught at all. Keep them back out of the way. Before we start actually shearing, I'm going to talk you through how you can get your lines straight. So one thing you can do if you're on a plain fabric is you can move the position of your needle. So I would recommend starting with your foot lined up against your straight edge where you've cut, and then move your needle all the way to the left. This will give you, depending on the size of your foot and your machine and things like that, but this will give you a big enough gap that when you're shearing, you can just follow the right side of your foot each time, and you should have a big gap, not huge, but a big enough gap in between your rows of shearing that it will keep it tight. And by following the side of the foot, you can keep your lines really straight as well. If you're using a gingham or a stripe or a check like I am here, you can just follow the lines of your foot if you'd rather, which is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to keep my needle in the middle and I'm going to follow my lines of my check. To secure my rows of shearing, I use this little knotting stitch on my machine. If you don't have this stitch, I would just use a back stitch. It just keeps everything in place and stops your rows of shearing from springing out as well. Now that we're ready, let's start sewing. So we're just going to keep the speed down a little bit here and go as straight as possible. We want to keep this really, really neat if we can. And we should start to see the fabric gathering in and shearing in just behind us. If you're not seeing that at this point, then you're going to need to rewind your bobbin because it means your elastic in your bobbin is not tight enough. Mine is looking great, so I'm going to keep going and I'm going to do a few other rows and show you how it looks in a second.
Okay, so a quick update as to where we are because I need to go off and have dinner in a minute. But what I have done is here on this second kind of block of shearing, I've done 5 rows, and then between the initial rows that I did, there's quite a gap. Hopefully you can see that, which I think is a little bit too big. So I'm gonna run another row of shearing along this very, very faint green line here. So there'll be 6 rows of shearing and then about 3/4 of an inch gap in between each block, which I think will look really, really nice. So it means I don't have to do quite as much shearing as I did when I did this one. It'll be a bit of a break, and it will also just be a little bit different. So it's not a fully sheared bodice, and it'll add a bit more interest and texture to the bodice. So I'm going to go ahead now and just keep going and doing that, which is going to take me, I think, an hour or 2, maybe. Gosh, I hope not 3. But I'm going to grab some snacks, put some YouTube on and settle in. And then once I've done all of the rows of shearing, we'll be ready to steam this and see what it's like size-wise, and then start on piece number 2. Can't wait. Hello, we've skipped on to the next day. I'm just about to cut out my piece for my back of my dress. I finally, this morning, finished all the shearing for the front of the dress. It's actually quite long. I've just put it up against my body, so probably could have lost a couple of inches. But like I said when I was cutting out, I prefer to have more than less because by the time you cut everything out and get it on you, it can change. And also you want a little bit extra for seam allowance and stuff like that. But I love how this looks with the gaps between the shirring. I think that's absolutely beautiful and far less time consuming than shearing the entire thing. So I've managed to re-energize this morning. I've had a couple of coffees and I'm ready to look at shearing elastic again because I was sick of the sight of it last night, and I'm gonna get going on the back piece. We'll go and cut it out. I was thinking about this piece here and it's come out not quite as wide as I kind of expected. It's really stretchy, so I don't think we need it any bigger. But usually with shearing, you steam the fabric and elastic to make it tighter. It kind of retracts in. But I'm not going to do that this time with cutting out, because if I do that, it's going to make it too small when we're cutting out. We can do that afterwards, because once it's kind of fitting to our body, it really doesn't matter. So let's go and cut out the back piece, and then we can get back on the machine and start round 2. Whose idea was this? Oh wait, mine. Why? Okay, so I'm just getting ready to cut out the back piece, and I really want these lines and this shearing to all match up. So I'm just going to cut the fabric so this will all line up, and then when I cut it out, I'll cut from the hem upwards, if that makes sense. So I'll make sure the bottom hem on the front and back is both even. Okay, so we're cut out and ready to go. Let's start again. We are now on our 3rd spool of elastic now as well. So I'm trying to take notes as to how many you're going to need, but it's looking like we're going to need 4 for this project. And if you were shearing more regularly than this and had tighter rows, you definitely need more. So make sure you stock up on that shearing elastic. Update. We are now halfway through the back panel. Can I please have a round of applause? We've done it. All the shearing is done. There is no more. We are now finally ready to move on to the next stage. I never ever thought I would say those words, but we're here. I really don't want to see any shearing elastic for a good couple of weeks though. So now the scary bit, we are going to cut into all those hours of work and we're going to make our bodice. Don't worry though, it's not that bad. I've done it before. You can cut into shearing and it won't disappear into nothingness. Just don't go pulling it around like this after you've cut it, because that is a recipe for disaster, trust me. I know from experience. We're going to cut, we're going to stay stitch, and it's all going to be fine. So what you're going to need is either a t-shirt or top that is stretchy but very fitted to your body. We don't want a tank, we want a t-shirt. You want something with sleeves, because we're going to be obviously attaching sleeves to this. So I've gone for this crew neck fitted stretchy t-shirt. The other option is you can use a stretch pattern of your choice, either from a dress or from a top or anything like that. If you've got a really fitted stretch pattern, you can use that. We just want a similar neckline. We want a pattern that has sleeves, so you've got a similar arm size so we can attach sleeves to it. It just needs to be really fitted. That's the main key thing. So you've got options. You can either just trace over an old fitted t-shirt and use that as your pattern piece. You can cut around it if you're feeling brave. That's exactly what I'm going to do today. Or you can use a pattern piece of your choice, whatever you feel most comfortable with. But I am going rogue and I'm just going to cut around this. I'm going to fold everything away and I'm just going to get scissor happy. Okay, so let's get cutting. So with this kind of shearing, you can actually just cut straight through it and it won't all spring away, but you need to be careful that you don't pull it. So we're going to cut this really carefully, and then we're going to take it to the machine and just stay stitch all of the edges just to make sure that they don't come apart and move. But I promise you, when you cut into it, it won't all snap away. can see these edges are really, really messy. But what we can do is we can just go in with our scissors and just neaten them up a little bit. Hopefully you can see this okay, but I've done some stay stitching around the neckline, around the shoulder seams, around the arm side, and down the side seams as well. Okay, so now time to cut the back piece. But the thing with this is we need to make sure that the lines of shearing are in the same direction. So this is going to be the top of my bodice and this is the bottom. And we want to try and get this matching up at the side seams as well, so it looks really neat. Do you see, like this? Because otherwise it's going to be really obvious if it's off. I've just pulled that down and this is where I want the underarm to sit. I hope this makes sense. I'm just going to pop a weight there so I know which one. Okay, so I've just lined everything up. Everything's now in the right place and this is all going to match when we attach it at the side seams. So now I'm just going to cut along here, along here, along here, and then get rid of some of these edges along the sides as well and neaten that up. And that's all our cutting done, thank goodness. And that is our back piece. It looks perfect. I'm so happy with that. Okay, we're ready to assemble the bodice. There's a couple of things we're going to do before we get started. If you have one, I would recommend switching to a walking foot at this stage, mainly because when we're going over and across the bits of shearing, especially at the shoulder seams and around the neckline that have been cut, when you're using a regular foot, sometimes that stretches those rows apart and we want the shearing kind of maintained at these bits so we maintain the shape of the bodice. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to this baby here. This is Mariflex thread. It's a thread that is designed for stretch fabrics and it's got a bit of stretch within it. So it's really, really great for garments of this nature, and it just means that our seams are going to stretch when we're taking this on and off. You use this just like a normal thread. You put it in your bobbin and as your top thread and just use a regular stitch length and sew as you normally would. So we're going to go side seams together, shoulder seams together, and then we're going to try and give this a little try on. Okay, first try on, and I'm really, really happy with this so far. It's looking good. It's too long, so we're gonna have to adjust the length a little bit and just bring that up. And then the other thing is, it's really, really tight under the arms. It's coming up really high. So I'm just going to need to bring those down a little bit just to make that a bit more comfy. But the neckline is perfect. I'm really, really happy with that. I don't think I'm gonna have enough fabric to do a tiered skirt, which is a shame, but I think it will be fine without. There's going to be enough kind of drama in this dress without needing the tiered skirt. So I'm going to do it as long as I possibly can, and then I'm literally just going to like gather this to the bodice. So I'm just going to figure out the length that I need this skirt. Basically, I am just making a rectangle, sewing it up at the side seams, and then I'm going to attach it to my bodice. That is all you kind of need for your gathered skirt. So I just realized I filmed a load of clips and my microphone wasn't on, so there's no audio. So just to summarize what's been going on, I sewed together the skirt, which is pretty boring and basic. I just overlocked the raw edge and sewed together that one seam. And then I cut out my sleeves ready to attach to my bodice, which I've already started doing, sorry. So the sleeve I chose to use is the Nomi 2016 sleeve, which is this bad boy here. This huge, huge sleeve. I did fold it in the middle and just take out some of the width because it is so big. I specifically chose to use this sleeve because A, I love the shape of it, but B, it's got a lot of gathering at the top. And for this pattern, I feel like you want a sleeve that's got a lot of gathering so you can kind of make it fit to the bodice a bit better. So you can use any sleeve that you like, but I would definitely recommend using a looser sleeve with gathering to make this fit. You don't really want something fitted because it's going to be really awkward to get fitting. That sleeve would fit pretty much any bodice just because of the way it's gathered in and the way it's shaped. But the bodice of the Nomi dress is very similar in shape to this, and then it's got the similar kind of size arm side to what we've got here. So it's going to work really, really well. But lots of sleeves will work for this. Just see what you've got in your stash. There's also lots of things that you can download for free, but I know a lot of you who watch my channel love the Nomi 2016 pattern, so I would highly recommend using that particular sleeve for this project. So I took about 2.5 inches out of the middle of the pattern just to make it a little bit smaller, because I didn't want it to be absolutely massive. But that's all I've done, and then I'm now gathering and attaching it to the bodice. So I'll bring you in closer and show you what I'm doing.
So when I'm attaching my sleeve, I'm making sure not to pull the shirred fabric as I go. So I'm attaching this as I would attach a sleeve to a regular bodice. This should be pretty easy to do, seeing as we've already put in the stay stitching, so the fabric shouldn't be stretching out as we sew.
Sleeve number 1 is attached. How cute is that looking? Let's get the second one on. Sorry, there might be a little bit of noise in the next part of this video because my kids are home from their aunties. But anyway, back to the dress. Here we are, sleeves are on. I'm really happy with these. I feel I maybe should have taken the gathering down a little bit more at the front. I might go back and do that actually, just to even them out because they're sitting a little bit funny right now. But aside from that, I'm really happy with them. They do have elastic that goes in the bottom, so they'll sit more like that, which looks really, really cute. Love these sleeves, they're amazing. So now it's time to tackle the dreaded neckline. I am going to do bias tape with a keyhole. I'm gonna go and get my bias tape maker machine out, which I know you guys love to watch. It's such a fun little tool. So we'll go and get that set up and cut some strips out ready to make some bias tape. And we're gonna wing it from here. I am just gonna hack away and try and make a keyhole with a tie, and hopefully it goes well. I have a piece of fabric left over, so we're gonna cut 2-inch wide strips across the bias, so across the stretch of the fabric, which is here. This isn't very wide, so we're gonna have to cut quite a few strips, I think, and then sew them together so we can get one long strip to do the neckline going into the tie, and then we'll need a smaller strip just for the keyhole detail as well. So let's get cutting and let's make some bias tape. So I straightened off all the ends of my bias strips so we can attach them nicely. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start putting them together so we can sew them and make one long strip. So right sides up, we're going to pop another strip on top in like an L shape, right sides facing, and then you just need to figure out where you need to pin for this to make a straight piece. So for this one we're going to go like that, so when you open it up it will be straight. We'll do another L shape, and I think we're going that way. No, we're not. We're going this way, that's better. So pin again. I always have to pin because otherwise, like you've just seen, I will forget which way to go. So that'll give us a really long strip. So I'm just gonna pin the rest on and then we'll sew. So we'll end up with something that looks a little bit like this. So obviously we need to get rid of all of this excess, but I tend to press this open first, so it makes the bias tape nice and flat and neat, and then I just go ahead and trim away the excess with my little scissors afterwards. Do you know what my favourite thing about this machine is though? Is that you can have a cup of tea while bias tape is being made. What could be better? Considering how textured and horrible this fabric is to work with and iron, I am very impressed with how that's turned out. Good morning. I am hoping that today is going to be the final day that we work on this dress. I really don't want to put any more hours into it after today. But we are nearly there, but we're at the fiddly stage now, the neckline, the bit I've been dreading. So we are going to create a keyhole at the back. It's not going to be tiny. I'm going to do it a bit bigger because that will make it a little bit less fiddly. And also, if I muck it up, then I don't know what I'll do. I haven't thought that far ahead, so scrap that. So first step, let's create a cardboard little template so we can cut around that for the keyhole shape. We're going to bind around that up to the neckline, and then when we get to the neckline, we're going to take the binding around the whole neckline in a separate piece, which will then give us a really, really nice finish. Let's find out if that's going to work, shall we? I've just made a little template using the lid of a candle. That's looking pretty good. So I've used like a thicker cardboard so I can cut around it. So I need to now find the middle of the back neckline, and we're literally just gonna place this on top, pin it in place and cut around with the rotary cutter. Ooh, scary. Okay, so in hindsight, it might have been a lot easier to do this when the bodice wasn't sewn together. So if you're watching this and not sewing as you go, I would cut this before you put the bodice together. I think that looks a really good shape. That should be really easy to follow. So I'm just going to measure how big this is to give you a rough idea. So on the widest point, it's 2 inches wide, and then we're 3.5 inches long. Hopefully that's a helpful measurement. I mean, if you were feeling really brave, you could do a slip. I think that would be really difficult to get that looking really precise on this shirring. So this should be a bit easier to do. Hopefully you can see this, but this is what we're left with. Obviously it's going to be a little bit messy around where we've cut because of where the shirring is, but once that's together, that should be okay. So let's put a little bit of bias tape around it and see what we're left with. So I want this bias tape to be visible on the outside of the bodice. So what I'm doing is I'm pinning within that first fold line of the bias tape, right side of the bias tape to the wrong side of the fabric. We're going to stitch in that fold line there all the way along, and then we're gonna fold it over, and then we're just gonna top stitch the other side all the way around like that, making sure everything's concealed, and that'll give a really lovely little look to it. So just to show you what I've just done, sorry my camera died, this is what we've got. So this is the inside of the fabric, the wrong side, and this is what it looks like on the right side. So obviously we've got this raw edge. So now we're just going to bring the bias tape over, fold everything under, and make sure all those raw edges are contained. We're going to pin round, and then we're going to top stitch this really neatly in place. Oh my gosh, it worked. And it looks really nice. It is quite big, but that's fine. It's quite nice to break it up because it's got a high neck on the back. It's good to have that kind of extra bit of detail. So I'm really, really pleased with how that turned out. So now we need to do the actual neckline. So I have a long strip of bias tape, and the whole point of that was I wanted to have it so it ties at the back. So I've got a bow at the back for a bit of extra detail. So I've found the middle of my neckline, and we're going to find the middle of this bias tape, get everything pinned in place, and then attach just exactly the same as we've just done. Make sure that you sandwich in these ends of this bias at the back. Okay, so I've just pinned like we did before, and I'll sew in that first fold line as we did before. But the difference here is we've got a bit of leftover where we're going to have this bit of tie at the end. So when you get to the end of the bodice where the keyhole starts, we're going to stop sewing there because we'll fold this over and we'll sew it together when we do this top layer, so it's nice and neat. And then we're just going to fold it over to the right side and pin as we did before, making it all look really neat. Except the difference is this time we're going to make sure that at this tie bit, we're folding that in half and pinning that too. So we're going to sew not only the bias tape, but we're going to sew all around there as well. Oh my gosh, it worked. I never ever thought those words would come out my mouth about this project, but it worked. We have got a super gorgeous, neat neckline. So let me get this off, let's get the skirt attached, and let's get this baby finished. I can't believe we're nearly at the end. I never thought we'd get here. So attaching the skirt to the bodice is easier than it sounds. We are not going to use any gathering because we don't need to, because basically what we're going to do is use the elastic from the sheared bodice, gather in the skirt for us. So we're gonna sew with the bodice pulled tight against the flat piece of the skirt that's not gathered. And then what will happen is when it's sewn together, it will gather in and the skirt will be gathered in as well. Let me show you on the machine so it makes a bit more sense. So I've done this while my dress is actually in my machine just on this side because it's so much easier because it stops it from moving. But what I've done is I've been pulling my bodice flat and tight so it matches up with the skirt, and then popping some pins in and then doing the same again. Hopefully you can see that. And out of sheer luck, mine has actually matched up, that I don't need any gathering all the way along here. So I am going to, now, I'm going to sew, pulling the bodice as tight as I can, keeping the skirt fabric flat, and then we're just going to sew. What you're going to want to do is just pull it at the other end. You probably can't see that where you are, but I'm just holding the other side as we go through, just to stop it from bouncing back or anything like that. If it doesn't match up exactly, you can add a little bit of gathering, or you can pop some pleats along the skirt as well, just to make sure that it lines up. But the great thing about shearing is it's super stretchy, so with a little bit more pulling, you should be able to make it fit. It is really quite fiddly. Take your time with it, move it around as you go, little by little, and we'll get there. Okay, and that has gathered in absolutely perfectly. It was really lucky actually. My fabric for my skirt was an exact match to this pulled tight. If yours isn't, you can add some pleats or some gathering just to get it to fit. It's easier to just add a couple of little pleats as you're kind of sewing along, because they really don't notice when you have the skirt like this. But this means that the skirt stretches perfectly with the bodice. Okay, I'm absolutely obsessed. This is a new favourite. I know I say this every time I make something new, but this is amazing. I love it so much. It's a little bit long right now. It's maxi length, which is a bit much. So I'm going to take a few inches off the hem, finish the hem, pop some elastic in these sleeves and just finish those, and then I'll show you the full reveal. I'm so excited about this. It was worth every second. This is gorgeous. And that is my sheared dress of dreams finally done. I am over the moon with how this turned out. It is a much better finish than my original pink version, that's for sure. It's really easy to get on and off. It's sitting really nicely on my body. It feels lovely to wear. And I really hope you like the end result and how all these details look as well. If you do decide that you're going to make this dress, please let me know in the comments what fabric you're going to be using. And if you share it over on any socials, please make sure to tag me. I would love to see your versions. If you are looking for a more in-depth tutorial on shearing, I'm going to share a video down in the comments that I made previously that has tons of tips and tricks to absolutely perfect your shearing. So if I didn't have it quite covered in this video, head over to that one and give it a watch, because there's loads of ideas on there, loads of techniques to get the perfect shearing every time. I apologize for the huge gap in between videos, but I decided to film this tutorial over school holidays when I had my 3 kids at home, which was a really bad idea. So it took ages, and then I had technical difficulties, and it just, yeah, it was an absolute mess. So thank you so much for bearing with me, but I really hope this tutorial was worth the wait. I will be dropping some bonus videos throughout May to make up for the lack of uploads, so keep an eye out for those. And make sure to follow me over on Instagram and TikTok to see what I'm getting up to and what I'm wearing during Me Made May as well. I'll be sharing lots of handmade outfit inspiration throughout the month of May, and then we'll do a big roundup on here at the end of May, and I'll show you loads and loads of things in my handmade wardrobe as well. It should be a really fun video. I can't wait for that one. But that's everything from me today. If you have any questions about the tutorial or feel like I've missed anything out, pop a comment below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. But I will see you soon. Have a great week. Take care and happy sewing. Bye.